So I work at Baycrest as a storyteller in residence, and I work in the palliative care ward, and I hear a lot of jokes. And I'm going to tell you a rude joke that I just heard from a family where the loved one was dying. And then I'm going to tell you a story an Anishinaabe storyteller told me, Basil Johnston. But anyway, the joke is, Mrs. Murphy and Mrs. Cohen were the very best of friends, and they were neighbors. But their husbands died, and so Mrs. Cohen moved to an old folks' home, and Mrs. Murphy moved to another one, a Catholic one. And so anyway, one day Mrs. Murphy came to visit her old friend and best friend and neighbor, Mrs. Cohen. She came over as Mrs. Cohen, nice to see you. Oh, Mrs. Murphy, it's so nice to see you. And Mrs. Murphy, yeah. How's life here in the place, in their residence? She said, it's pretty good. The staff are nice, and the food is good. But the best thing is, guess what? I have a boyfriend now. And Mrs. Murphy, ooh, tell me all about it. And she said, yeah. He comes over. We wait for the nurses to leave us alone. He comes into my room at night. And he sits on my bed. And Mrs. Murphy, ooh, tell me more. She says, yeah, he touches me a little up here. He touches me a little down there. And then we hold hands and sing Jewish songs. Oh, wow, that sounds great. And Mrs. Murphy, and so what's it like where you are? She says, it's nice too, yeah. Staff are nice, the food is good, but guess what? I have a boyfriend too. Oh, what's it like? Yeah, it's like you said, we wait to have a little private time, which is hard in long-term care facilities, but we wait, and he comes into my room. He sits next to me on my bed, and touches me a little up here, and he touches me a little down there, and then, since we don't know any Jewish songs, we fuck. This is what they're up to at the geriatric facility. So every time we're here, Halloween, ghosts, in a palliative ward, you're right up against it, and it's amazing how people are still laughing right up to the time they're not. So I just thought that, so Basil Johnston told me this story. He's no longer with us, great Anishinaabe storyteller. And I have to give a little prelude to this story. Up on Lake Couchiching is a camp called Camp Couchiching. Some of you might know it. And I went up there one time. I was talking to the counselors, and I asked them if they told any ghost stories. Summer camp, that's a lot of ghost stories. But they said, no, we don't. Used to be an Anglican camp, so no, we don't tell ghost stories. There's something about Anglicans, I don't know. But they said, but we made up a story about Finnegan the elf. And I said, what's Finnegan all about? Oh, he's a gentle little creature, lives in the forest, and he's always nice to children if they're lost or they're lonely or they're homesick. Kids come to camp, they get homesick, and we tell them about Finnegan the elf. And I said to them, well, that sounds like a really nice story, but you didn't make it up. Because the native people all around the shore of Lake Couchiching and Lake Simcoe and the Anishinaabe people throughout tell stories about the Memigawense. And the Memigawense are little people who live in the forest and are kind to children and help them if they're lost and lonely. So once there was a woman lived with her little boy and her husband in a lodge on the shore of a great lake. And one day when she and the little boy were home, they looked across the lake and they saw a huge giant coming roaring towards them from the other side of the lake, so big he could splash through the lake water. It was a Wendigo. A Wendigo is a cannibal with a heart of ice. And she grabbed her son and she pulled him into the lodge. And the little boy didn't know what was going on, and they could hear this thing roaring across the lake, screaming, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. And the little boy said to his mother, Mommy, who's that? Who's that? Well, guess what? She didn't want to say to her little boy, yeah, that's a Wendigo. It's a cannibal with a heart of ice. It's going to eat us. So she said, it's your grandfather. He came right up to the door of the lodge and he screamed with hunger. And the little boy got away from his mother's arms. He ran out the door of the lodge and he looked up at this giant, this monster, and he said, hello, grandfather. Now, the Wendigo had never been spoken to like that before. And instead of devouring the little boy and his mother, the Wendigo just said, bring me food. And they had food, and they served it to the Wendigo, who ate it in one gulp and fell asleep. And when the father came back from the hunt, he saw the Wendigo sleeping there. And the Wendigo woke up, and the father had a deer that he threw, and the Wendigo ate it, bones and blood and everything. And when the Wendigo went back to sleep, the mother said, kill him. He said, you cannot kill a Wendigo. By the way, we had a Wendigo in Pittsburgh the other day. She said, we can't kill him, and the father said, we cannot escape either. She said, what will we do? Well, we will feed him. And in fact, the Wendigo said to the family, I would eat you except for your little son, who spoke to me with respect. And for that reason, I will not destroy you. But every day, the more food they brought, the more he ate, and he was insatiably hungry. Until one day when the father was hunting, the Wendigo said to the little boy, I must leave. I am not getting enough food. If it hadn't been for you, you would all be dead right now. But I must go. And in the rage of his hunger, he took his club and he smashed a rock and ran away. And a chip of the rock flew across the lodge and hit the boy's mother in the head, and she died. When the father came back from the hunt, the little boy was crying by his mother's body. They buried her by her favorite oak tree. They kept the ceremonies for the 4 days. And the father said to his son, we will bring an old woman from the village to be with you. I have to go hunt to get food. The little boy wasn't happy being away from his father. He said, can I come with you, Daddy? No, son. I walk for miles and miles to find food. You're too young. You're only, I think he was about 6 years old. But the little boy didn't like being looked after by the old woman, and he was bored. And when the father came back that night, he said, Daddy, there's nothing to do. He said, I will teach you to use a bow and arrow. Be careful with your weapons. And the little boy was the next day trying to shoot squirrels. It didn't work out too well, but he tried. And near the end of the day, he shot an arrow up into the air. It came down near the oak tree and disappeared. He looked for it. He couldn't find it. Father came home that night. How was your day? It was fun. I shot my bow and arrow, but I lost my arrow by the oak tree. A hunter has to take care of his weapons, son. Take better care tomorrow. Well, the next day he was out again, shooting, trying the birds, the squirrels. He wasn't a very good shot, but he tried. And near the end of the day, again, the arrow went up, came back down near the oak tree, disappeared. And the little boy ran up to the oak to get the arrow, to look for it by the bushes near the oak tree. And when he came right up to the oak, inside the oak was the face of a little boy about his age. And he looked inside. The boy's name was Nawatin. And he called out to the boy inside the tree. Where's my arrow? My father told me, but what are you doing inside the tree? Who are you? And the little boy stepped out from the tree and said, my name is Wematik, heart of the oak. And little Nawatin said, would you play with me? And the two boys played together all day long. And near the end of the day, Wematik said, you must promise never to tell your father about me. Oh, I promise I will never tell. And that was his life after that. When the father went hunting, he would run off to the oak tree and call for his friend. And Wematik knew many things a 6-year-old boy would not normally know. He knew how to hunt and to build a fire and to hunt and to trap. And he knew many games every day. They had so much fun. They loved to wrestle too. And when the father would come back, how was your day? It was fun, Daddy. Look, I killed and roasted a rabbit myself. How is that possible? Well, Wematik had shown him, but he didn't say a word about Wematik. Life went on. One day, Nawatin came to the oak and said, come and play, come and play. And they were out playing. They didn't know the father had, instead of going to paddle to fish, he had gone into the woods. And the kids were playing, they were playing a game with plum pits, trying to guess how many were under each cup and so. And they played all day. They were having so much fun. When all of a sudden the father stepped out from behind a tree, he had come back from the hunt. And there was Nawatin, his son. Nawatin means peaceful in Anishinaabe. There was his son, and there was Wematik. And the father stood there. Wematik said, don't harm me, please don't harm me. And the father said, no, no, I will not harm you. And when he looked at the face of the little boy from the tree, he recognized his wife's face. And he understood that his wife had come back as a Memigoense to look after their son. And every day the two boys played, and every day he learned so many things from Wematik. And that went on for 2 years, till he was about 8 years old enough to go hunting with his father. And on that day, he ran to the oak tree to play with his friend. He called for him, Wematik, come out to play. But he never came back again.